Good morning, and welcome to your morning cereal. Okay, good morning, and welcome to Tuesday. Now, let's just stop for a moment and celebrate the fact that we all made it through another Monday. And that's got to count for something, right? Now, I hate giving Mondays such a bad rap, but no one is ever ready or excited for a Monday, unless you're headed on a vacation, right? And that's why we're celebrating the fact that it's Tuesday, and we all have a Monday behind us, and we're well on our way into this week. Well, today is Let's All Eat Right Day. And I've been trying to eat right today for the last 15 years, but I'll give it another try again today. And it doesn't help that it's also National Chocolate Covered Nut Day. I may need to push that one to tomorrow. All right, well, welcome to Tuesday, people. Let's get into the episode with today's quotes. One fun, nostalgic quote, and then a second quote to tease our book review later in the episode. Hopefully, one of these quotes will speak to you and kickstart your day in a positive direction. The first quote is from Melanie Chisholm. And if you don't know who that is, that would be Sporty Spice of the Spice Girls. Anyways, Melanie said, "This is me. Take it or leave it," end quote. And it's nice when you reach a certain maturity that you're okay with just saying, hey, this is me, take it or leave it. On the other hand, I think some people reach a certain age where they just take this stance irregardless. And oftentimes that comes without the maturity. But I'll give them this, it's definitely much more entertaining. Anyways, today's teaser quote from the book is, "He who treads softly goes far." And as usual, we'll unpack that here in just a minute during the book review segment. But first, let's jump into our usual dose of fun and historic facts from this day in history. And today's news facts and birthdays are for February 25th. Starting back in 1910, the 13th Dalai Lama, he fled Tibet for British India to escape Chinese troops. Then in 1913, one of my least favorite amendments to the U.S. Constitution, although I understand we need it, it went into effect. It's the amendment that permitted a federal income tax. Then in 1957, Buddy Holly and the Crickets, they recorded their smash hit, "That'll Be the Day." They did that in Clovis, New Mexico. Then in 1964, American boxer Muhammad Ali, known at the time as Cassius Clay, he would become the world heavyweight champion by knocking out Sonny Liston in 7 rounds. And then lastly, skipping all the way up to 2004, that's when the movie Passion of the Christ was released in the U.S. All right, well, happy birthday if today is your birthday. You share a birthday with actress Rashida Jones. She was on The Office. You might remember her from that. She's 49. And this next actor, you'd recognize him. His character Mikey said, "Goonies never die." And his character Samwise said, "I can't carry it for you, but I can carry you." That's actor Sean Astin. He's 54 today. And wrestler Ric Flair. He's 76 today. Well, the number one movie on this date back in 1991 was Kindergarten Cop. And you remember this movie. It starred Arnold Schwarzenegger. He was a detective working undercover as a kindergarten teacher. What you probably remember most about the movie is the fact that there was a famous line in it said by this cute little kid. And he basically said in very plain terms, he described the difference between little boys and little girls. Well, the movie helped Schwarzenegger showcase his comedic abilities, making him more than just an action hero star. And the number one song on this date back in 1997 was "Wannabe," which was the debut single from my beloved Spice Girls. Okay, I was a fan of the Spice Girls. I still am. And as I mentioned last week, I'm a huge fan of Celine Dion as well. Well, I took a lot of flack for that in the 90s, as you can imagine. But I totally owned it then, and I own it now. The song "Wannabe" was the Spice Girls' first release, and by the end of 1997, it had reached number one in 37 nations, becoming the best-selling single by a girl group, and it was the most recognizable pop song of the last 60 years among English speakers. So it turns out maybe they weren't just a bunch of wannabes. All right, well, let's move on to some personal growth in the book review segment of Morning Cereal. This is where we take a few moments to reflect on lessons learned from the current book we're reading, and currently we're reading through Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. It's a timeless book that is consistently on all the must-read lists, and it's packed with rock-solid advice and actions for us all to use and build healthy foundational concepts to live by. Yesterday, we began Chapter 5, The Secret of Socrates, and today we'll finish Chapter 5. And Carnegie introduced the yes-yes technique, which is a method of emphasizing things that you can agree upon that will get the other person saying yes, and aim for these yeses from the other person while trying to avoid getting them to say no. Carnegie says, quote, "In talking with people, don't begin by discussing the things on which you differ. Begin by emphasizing and keep on emphasizing the things on which you agree," end quote. In another example of the yes-yes technique, Carnegie retells the account of a car engine salesman that used this yes-yes technique when he encountered some hesitation on a large purchase from a potential big customer that he had finally cracked open after years of calling on. The problem was the lead engineer thought the engines were running too hot. So the salesman methodically moved through the conversation, finding points of agreements where he could get a yes. And the salesman started out agreeing. He did not say that he was wrong or that he didn't agree, but he agreed with the engineer that if the engines were running too hot, then he shouldn't buy them. Well, the salesman got his first yes when the engineer agreed that his company shouldn't buy any engines that ran hotter than the standard set by the regulators. So the two of the men, they ended up testing the temperatures of the engines, and they both agreed that the engines were running within the standards, and potentially just testing the heat of the engines by placing your hand on a 147-degree metal engine, maybe that wasn't the best unit of measurement that the engineer was using. So those were the salesman's second and third yeses. Look, this wasn't an easy conversation, but the salesman remained calm and friendly. He looked for viewpoints or perspectives they could agree on, and he methodically walked through the facts, getting yeses and essentially just getting the ball moving downhill. The salesman said of his learning, quote, "I finally learned that it doesn't pay to argue, and that it is much more profitable and much more interesting to look at things from the other person's viewpoint and try to get that person saying yes, yes," end quote. And finally, Carnegie gets us to Socrates. And he says this of Socrates, that he was, quote, "was one of the greatest philosophers the world has ever known. He did something that only a handful of men in all of history have been able to do. He sharply changed the whole course of human thought. And now, 24 centuries after his death, he is honored as one of the wisest persuaders who ever influenced this wrangling world," end quote. And Carnegie asks if we think that Socrates told people they were wrong. Of course not. In fact, Socrates has his own technique, which is called the Socratic method, and it was based on the yes-yes response. Carnegie says Socrates would, quote, "ask questions with which his opponent would have to agree. He kept on winning one admission after another until he had an armful of yeses. He kept on asking questions until finally, almost without realizing it, his opponents found themselves embracing a conclusion they would have bitterly denied a few minutes previously," end quote. Carnegie cites an old Chinese proverb that states, quote, "He who treads softly goes far," end quote. The next time we find ourselves with the temptation of telling someone that they are wrong, Carnegie suggests that we call on our old friend Socrates and ask the question, gently seeking those yeses. Here it is. In a chapter entitled The Secret of Socrates, Carnegie's principle number 5 is get the other person saying yes, yes, immediately. Okay, did you stick with this during the book review until the end? And did I not tell you that we'd get to Socrates today and finish the chapter? See how easy it is? That was 2 yeses that I just got from you. Well, is today Tuesday? Yes. And are you going to have a great day? Yes. But I think by now you know the real answer to that is you're going to have a fantastic day. Yes? Well, thanks for joining today. Join us again tomorrow when we start Chapter 6 entitled The Safety Valve and Handling Complaints. We'll see you then. Have a fantastic day. Don't forget to follow and subscribe to the Morning Serial podcast on the One Life Live It channel. You can find more episodes and videos by visiting our YouTube channel and the website at Sean Inglis and at SeanInglis.com, where you can also follow our other podcasts, the Mr. and Mrs. Inglis podcast and the Life Happens podcast. In these other podcasts, we'll dive deeper into everyday issues, self-improvement and well-being, business and finance, and we welcome special guests too. So join us. It'll be a good time, I promise. Thanks again for listening. Have a fantastic day, and we'll see you tomorrow.